Welcome to the Bend Don't Break podcast. I'm Aaron Schweitzer, publisher of The Source Weekly. I'm joined by editor Nicole Volken. We are powered by The Source Weekly, Bend's locally owned newspaper. Today we are testing out a new setup here at the Haven co-working space. We're very excited about it. As you can see for longtime listeners, the look is a little bit different in here. But we're super excited about the audio and video quality that we hope to get. And so bear with any technical difficulties we may have in our new space. We're joined today by Jill Mahler. Did I say the last name right?
Yes, you did.
We just say Jill so much that we go there. Jill recently stepped down from her role as station manager and executive director of KPOV, our local nonprofit community radio station. Jill started her KPOV career in 2008 as part-time office manager of the then-fledgling station with a passion for community and without any media experience. Over the years, she aided KPOV in growing from a small, low-power station to a Central Oregon institution, overseeing operations with a small staff and about 100 volunteers. Needless to say, it was an exciting ride and a great learning experience. Jill left her position in 2020 during the pandemic, but has stayed involved with the station, assisting the new staff and sharing her institutional knowledge. She currently focuses her time on reviving a neglected art practice and being a hands-on grandma to two just grandchildren, while staying open to whatever new opportunities and experiences come along. I also want to mention that KPOV is also neighbor to the Source Weekly. We are in the hood together, in the little downtown media hood.
We think that neighborhood should have a name.
Yeah.
We got the museum and you guys and KPOV and a library. There's a lot going on there.
It's like a brain trust.
It is.
Information district.
Yes, that's right.
So you worked your way up from KPOV, from an office manager in 2008 to become station manager in 2015. Maybe just talk a little bit about that path. I'm sure we could be here all day. But
it's a little dangerous to get me started on that,
Sure.
actually. But I've been thinking lately it was sort of like my empty nest job because I had raised my kids. I've lived in Central Oregon for 22 years now. I'd raised my kids. My daughter had gone off to college. My son was still in high school. But, I'd been working at administrative jobs part-time. My husband has a business. I do administration for his business and just little things here and there in the art that I mentioned before. But I kind of wanted something part-time still, but something that just felt like I could put more into it.
Sure.
Like I was trying to do work that didn't require a lot of me emotionally because I had my family I was taking care of. And I felt like I was ready for something that just sparked a little bit more passion in me.
You might have misjudged that about the thing that wouldn't take a lot of your time.
Well, yes. I mean,
Right.
Yeah, anyway, it just seemed like a fun thing. It was community-oriented, which was something I was really interested in. And I knew somebody that was a DJ at the station, and I saw they had an ad in the Source, I think, for a job opening, and I thought, oh man, that just feels like the right thing for me right now. And I applied for the job, and they hired me, and it was like 12 hours a week or something. And as I mentioned in our conversation earlier, the treasurer was doing the bookkeeping, and they were like, oh, she has bookkeeping skills, and pretty soon I'm doing the bookkeeping, add a few hours, and just, taking on more responsibilities. And when the previous station manager, Pearl, who I'm sure you know, was ready to step down and move on with her life, as, happens in the nonprofit world, she kept asking me, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready to take over? And I kept saying, no, for a couple of years. And finally I said, yeah, I think I am. And so I just transitioned into that position, took some of the things I was already doing with me into that position and, hired a new office manager to do some of the other stuff. And, we shuffled positions around. There were only 3 staff at the time, so we shuffled things around. And I have no regrets. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
It was very stressful. It was a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
But it was really fulfilling. I learned so much. It was exciting because every day, you guys probably have this too. You wake up and you just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's dreadful, but there's that excitement around it. Like, oh my gosh, we have to fix this thing, and how are we going to do it? And it was really great.
That's great.
I just got to the point where I felt like, clear some space to bring in some younger people. And, I've done my 12 years and it just felt like it was time for me to kind of move on and continue to assist the station to move forward in whatever way I could, short of being the station manager.
Sure.
Yeah, isn't it funny? I think we probably share this. The things that maybe are the most memorable are some of the worst things that happen.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah. They had a little thing for me at the station when I was finally leaving. It was my last day, my last official day, and they had the board come in and the staff and gave me some flowers and whatnot. And somebody said, "Well, what's your most fun memory of KPOV?" And I was like, I don't know. You're right. The things that stick with you are the things that are just when the transmitter quit working, when the antenna quit working, just all that crazy stuff that happens, and you just, rise up to meet it, and you don't have any idea what you're doing, but you figure it out.
So you touched on those two things, the transmitter and the other thing. Were those the biggest challenges that you encountered? That was a question I
For sure.
have.
So the first thing that happened, it happened pretty quickly after I took over. I would say within the first year that I was the station manager, the antenna quit working. It turned out it was struck by lightning. So, we had to figure that out. We had to figure out how to raise the money for a new one. This is expensive equipment. KPOV was very much on a shoestring at that point in time. We didn't have the money in the bank to do it. So we had to do the fundraising. We had to, figure out the technology, get an engineer to help us figure out what we needed. There was another thing that was happening at the same time. Probably won't say too much about this, but we were trying to increase our power, our power output, and as it turned out, our transmitters on Forest Service land, and the Forest Service in the end didn't allow us to do that. But we had these grand plans to, increase our power exponentially because we have, as most people know, some dead spots around town where our signal doesn't reach very well. So, so there was that. So we had that going on at the same time, and we were like, should we try and get the equipment that we would use if we wanted to increase our power, because that would require bigger, fancier, more expensive equipment. So there was figuring that out, and yeah, it was. There were some sleepless nights there. I believe it happened either in the middle of or right before a membership drive. So we were actually off the air for some period of time. I would say weeks. We were on the air, but so faint that it was like a coat hanger basically for an antenna.
Only for the source. We were the only ones who could.
We just opened our window.
And then the transmitter thing happened. We resolved that. Actually, we had a donor and friend of the station who generously loaned us money to buy that antenna, and we were able to pay that off over time. But not too long after that, the transmitter went out. And the transmitter, again, it was the thing when we went from low power to full power in 2011, on a shoestring, can't afford to buy all the big fancy equipment, didn't have, had a refurbished small transmitter, and it just didn't have the life in it. So surprise, surprise, that went out, and we had to raise money and buy another big fancy piece of equipment.
Yeah. Maybe we can, and that kind of segues into talking a little bit about the difference between community nonprofit radio and commercial radio. And you've had a front row seat to the difference in those two. Maybe give readers a sense of how does that really come to play? Yeah,
there's things on both the financial side and on the programming side, actually, the distinguished community radio. On the financial side, we are supported by donors of some sort or another. We have individual donors who are our listeners in the area, and our listeners who in other places as well, because we stream and friends and family and all that. And we have grant support, which is also basically a donation, and underwriting, which is similar to commercial radio advertising, although the language is different. It's somewhat equivalent.
Right.
And I'm trying to think, there's another revenue stream. What is it? It'll come to me. So that's basically, it's all donation-based. Right. It's just donations in different forms. So there's this whole fundraising thing that's happening in the background, and it's not quite like advertising. But on the programming side also, really the people that are running the station and doing the programming and on the air are all volunteers. There's no paid programming staff. They did just hire a program director, and we've had a programming director for a long time, but that's just an administrative person who's sort of managing all the moving parts. But it's people from the community that are producing a lot of the content. We have syndicated programming as well, as you know, but the local content is all produced by volunteers, and anybody from the community can come in and take our classes and learn how it works and apply for a show and do a show. So it's a very different thing. I wasn't a media person when I started out. I had no designs on working at a commercial media, any media. It was the community aspect that was interesting to me.
Well, that supporter-driven model has become, it was unique to community radio, but now it's such a big part of what media outlets do. Certainly all the print outlets are doing it now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It has gone that direction.
Yeah.
Have you felt that in the sense of how many donations or the volume, how much you're raising, that maybe these other media outlets are kind of doing that same thing?
No. KPOV is still so young and still trying to expand our reach and have people even recognize that we're here. Like a lot of people in Bend, if you did a poll, still would maybe not be aware of KPOV. A lot of people, not that many people listen to radio anymore, or not as many, I should say. People certainly listening to radio, but there's a large swaths of people who maybe KPOV is just off their radar. So, we have steadily increased our support year after year after year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like there's a lot of competition. If we have competition, it's probably more just in the nonprofit world, that there are so many nonprofits in Bend that are competing for those donations.
Mm-hmm. So for example, just having come from other, community stations, they would select their fundraising times when other stations may not be doing
Yes,
theirs,
that is true.
like
That is true. Oh, you're right. If you're thinking in terms of other, like PBS, we do try and do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they do, PBS, the OPB is available in Bend, so that is, and there's, the classical station out of Eugene. There are some other community type nonprofit stations that reach here, and people do donate to them. But I feel like our model is different. We are the local station, and what we offer, the eclectic mix that we offer, is different than what anybody else is doing. So I've never felt that there was that much, competition. It was more just, how do we reach everyone? How do we let people know we're here and what we do and how they can participate?
Jill, maybe explain why is this media so important? Why is community radio, such a thing that people are so passionate about?
I think it is the participatory nature of it. With KPOV, I feel like the founders had a couple of different objectives. One was just to bring information that wasn't necessarily available anywhere else, or at least on the radio airwaves, to Central Oregon. There's, as far as talk radio goes, there's basically one station in town. The message of KPOV is different from that station. And we offer music as well, and I think that our music offerings are also different from what other stations are playing. Super eclectic, because it's volunteer driven. And the volunteers really bring in their knowledge of the music that they're passionate about, and they bring in their music, and it's just not anything that's available anywhere else for the most part. So I think that the participatory nature of it is what makes it really unique, in that anybody can be on the radio. You can get information on the radio that you may not be able to get anywhere else on the airwaves, but also if you want to be on the radio, you can come in if you have something that we interview a lot of nonprofits, we get their messages out. If you have something that you're interested in and passionate about, you have that opportunity to come in and talk about it on the radio and let people know what's going on.
It was a great experience when I was coaching the Ultimate Frisbee team at Summit, and those kids got in to get on a sports show, and it was their first time being media, and they had the microphone there, and they were being interviewed, and they the KPOV staff treated them like rock stars. That was a really fun show. I wish that KPOV had something like that. Still, that's the other thing with KPOV, is that it's dependent on the volunteers. The administration can't dictate, we're going to do this show and we're going to have these people hosted. They have to come in with that passion and the willingness to spend the time, because it takes a lot of time. Talk shows and music shows both take a lot of time to produce, and these people are doing it, in their spare time for fun. Right. Yeah. So if you know anybody that wants to do a local sports show, that would be really great. He did a good job.
Get the word out. We spend a lot of time thinking about the news side of what we do, even though that's really a fraction of what the coverage is for the week, and I think that's similar with KPOV, but I spent a lot of time thinking about media and the landscape of media in Central Oregon, and do the people here have what they need to stay informed? So I was just curious, like, what, in your impression, maybe the community missing?
Yeah, that has been a goal of KPOV ever since they went on the air, is to be able to do more kind of local news. It is a kind of a news desert out there. It feels like everything's coming from social media. Like social media is driving all the conversations that people are having, and that's where they're getting in news. I have to say I really appreciate that the Source has stepped up and started doing those in-depth, real local newsy articles. I think it's amazing, and I think there's a huge need for that. And that is something that KPOV would like to do. As we know, news costs money. You have to hire journalists. It doesn't, as they say, now KPOV's never gotten into like hard news other than the syndicated programs that we play. But you have to, it doesn't bring in money. People don't, I guess, buy advertising for news. Is that right? What I've heard, I don't know. But anyway, it is an aspiration of KPOV's to do more news. We did step into the edge of that space with doing more community affairs programming with the morning show, The Point. And that can be very newsy. They do long-form interviews with candidates, and I would say probably the political stuff is the most newsy kind of stuff that we do. But I still have hopes that someday we'll be able to actually add a news department and maybe be able to do a daily news. They're doing a short segment, every day that gets plugged into different places. Started with COVID. This is the COVID news, so people would have a place to know what's happening on a day-to-day basis. And volunteers are doing that. There's a couple people that write it and a couple people that read it, and it plays a few times a day. And they've added other types of news to it since the pandemic has calmed down a little bit. For now, but to actually have, do maybe a morning news program or do something a little bit longer is something that KPOV still aspires to do. I think it's needed more than ever. Like I said, the Source is stepping into that space. I think podcasts are somewhat filling that space, but there's still a need for that, and it's something that's really locally driven. I'm proud of the syndicated programming that KPOV has, because it is stories that you don't hear in other places, and it brings voices that aren't heard otherwise. But I'd like to see more of a local resource, really getting local relevant stories.
Well, I think one of the things you're pointing to that we are all struggling with, all the communities across the country, is it shifts, is having a place like KPOV where you have a passionate hub where you can have community discussions and you have some oversight, you have some editorial vision for what you're trying to do, and that's just a lot different. And you're held to a higher standard. You're out soliciting donations, so you've got to be on your A game. We're selling advertising. We know we have a body of readership, and we have people who are supporting us that are looking to us to be at a certain level. Like, certainly isn't true for social media, where you can get on and no one's going to care. And I think one of the things, I think, especially for yourself, having your finger on the pulse of accounting and seeing as these things develop and as you're raising money, you are essentially trying to keep a staff over there that's volunteer. There aren't a lot of paid positions over there, but they're putting a ton of content into the community that's valuable.
That's right.
And I'm just, that's got to be one of the things for, we talk about things we remember and things we don't being, some of the more challenging. And that's certainly one of them, trying to get the most you can with what you got in a small community like Bend.
Yeah, and I mean, we are very, very listener driven. We have to think about it, and it's hard to know who those listeners are or what their impressions are, and you do get some feedback from them, but certainly not all the feedback. There are people out there that are thinking, they like it, they dislike it, they have opinions, but you don't necessarily know what they are because it isn't a face-to-face interaction, it's the radio. So, we're very cognizant of what the listener's experience is and the volunteer experience as well. I mean, we try to really take care of those volunteers because if they're not having fun, there's no reason for them to be there. I mean, they're absolutely doing it for the joy of what they do and the passion that they have for, whether it's a music show or a talk show, they have something that they want to put out there, and they're doing it, for the love of it. And if it's not a fun experience for them, then it's amazing how many of them, almost all of them, stayed during the pandemic when we said, oh, by the way, you can't come in the station now, but we still need you to produce a show for us. And people started learning how to do it remotely, how to do remote interviews, how to produce music shows at home. And they all stepped up and did it because they care that much about it.
It's the thing that strikes me about community radio. It's a passion project.
Yep, it absolutely
people
is.
They aren't compensated. They do it for love, and you can hear it. It's what comes out. It's not they're not waking up at 8 o'clock and going in because they have to.
And I'm grateful for how much passion there is for it out there, that people keep coming in. Some people step away and new people come in to fill those spots. And, my leaving, I have no doubt that the station will continue without me being there, because there are a lot of passionate people out there that are going to keep it going. And including, the people who kindly donate their money to make sure that happens as well.
I'm sure they'll continue to try to reel you back in, Jill.
Oh, I will. The board has asked me numerous times to be on the board. And someday, maybe I will, but not today.
So since the station is, still regulated by the FCC, you have the internet realm, but, you're still on the airwaves.
Yeah.
You have a code of conduct you have to adhere to because you get to use airtime. What happens in this small station run by a few staff and an army of volunteers when someone messes up? What happens?
Well, depending on how badly somebody messes up. Accidents happen, stuff breaks, things don't work, and people can't figure things out, and you just move on from that. If you're talking about people, like maybe the occasional song with a bad word in it that slips through, we have a process in place. Our view is we mostly just need to show the FCC that we are taking it seriously. So we have a system of it needs to be reported. Self-reporting is rewarded. If you say, "Oops, I just played a song," can you? Hiding it, covering it up is never a good idea. Come to us and tell us. There's 2-week suspensions that happen. It happens. I would say not super often. But it happens, and we have a process in place just to show the FCC, in case someone were to complain to the FCC and they took that complaint seriously, can show them the process that we have and how we document it and how we dole out, punishment, if you will, for it. So, not my biggest concern. It happens. You deal with it and you move on.
Would that be a bigger concern than something like libel or slander that happens on
libel and slander are serious. We've never had an incident where that really came into play. We have policies against it, but mostly what you're talking about is training, just making sure that people know. If a guest says something, you can't necessarily control that. They're a guest. I think that the people who do the talk shows do brief their guests on, the nature of the interview and what it is that they're talking about, and I don't think they don't say anything about it, but it just doesn't seem like it really happens. I think everybody's careful, and the DJs hopefully well trained and know what they can and can't say or do. If it were to happen, I would say that person, especially if it was an on-air host, would probably not be at the station any longer, but it's never really come up in my experience.
Yeah, that's tough.
Luckily, I'm grateful we're not. The only federal oversight over us is on litigious things.
Yeah,
so we don't get slapped on our hand. Of course, we do intentionally let the potty word get into the paper.
Sure. If it seems like it's, as in conversation, if it feels like it's called for, you say it. We may say it in the office, but not on the air. And, we're all adults and we can control ourselves in the right setting.
It's funny in that space how things have changed so much. Your cable, your channels, your streaming channels.
Oh, yeah.
HBO Max, all that stuff there.
Well, people come in and they do brief their guests on what they can and can't say. And some people can't understand why we would say that was a rule. They don't even know that still exists. That the FCC is overseeing content. Nobody's watching network television.
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes me wonder if that has led really to more of the proliferation of podcasts and it's sort of the social media version of media because it's a little bit more regulated.
Yeah, the problem with us is, a lot of our content is music, and the music is regulated, and so we can't have music in podcasts. And if somebody says, hey, I think my show would make a great podcast, I'd say, then you have to cut out all the music or make sure that you specifically have the rights to each of those tracks. And it does limit the ability to podcast. And podcasting is something that we got into a few years ago. We created a podcast network on our website. It's still growing. It's been slow growth. But to be able to take mostly the news and talk content and be able to let people listen to that on demand and not expect that everybody's going to tune in at 9 o'clock in the morning to listen to that interview, they can time shift. And it gives what I feel like is really good content in a lot of cases more legs so that more people will be able to hear it. And that's, I know that the current administration at KPOV has plans to kind of ramp that up a little bit. They got some grant funding recently to build out that and get some of those really important conversations in that space.
Good. Well, you're moving on now from KPOV. Joke about being reeled in aside. What are your plans for the future? What are you going to do to keep this passion going?
Well, I have a couple things I'm doing right now. One of the at least excuses I gave when I left because it felt so awkward and I felt like I had to explain myself somehow. I'm babysitting for my granddaughter. My daughter moved back from Colorado a couple of years ago, and she's got a 6-year-old who's in school now, but a 1.5-year-old who's at home, and she and her husband both work full time, so I babysit a couple days a week. Which is wonderful. They are gorgeous children. I know you haven't seen them, but you were spot on. And I have an art practice as well. I used to be an artist, or be able, call
Always
myself
an
artist.
It's never an actor.
But because of KPOV took a lot of my creative energy, I just found I wasn't doing anything. So I've recently taken up tapestry weaving, and that is my thing.
Great.
So I'm trying to carve out time to do that every day. And then also just sort of trying to keep space for, I feel like there's something out there for me.
Oh.
And I'm just hoping that it'll show itself at the right time.
Yeah. There's going to be Jill, you've done a fabulous job over there. And
thank you.
We didn't even get to a fraction of the stuff about the heavy lifts for getting those transmitters going and higher power and just the day-to-day stuff.
I could go on and on about that, believe me.
Before we met, you talked about you had some younger folks coming into the station. Yeah,
and that was the other thing. It was I really did feel like it was important to clear space for some younger, different voices, different people with different ideas. I could have run the station for the rest of my life, and it would be joyful, and I'm sure I would do a good job. But I think, younger people with different ideas, and there's a new development director. She's been there about a year. She's awesome. They just hired a new programming director who has been a volunteer at the station for a long time, and so knows a lot about the station and the technology, and I think she's going to do an amazing job. And I'm excited for the staff to just have some new blood. And
what do you hope for them to how do you hope they grow?
I think because it's a nonprofit, financial growth is always something that you think about. Growing the listenership, growing the donors. And then, adding this news program that I was talking about, and more training for the DJs, and just making it available for more people to participate in.
Awesome.
More of the same.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, thanks for taking this time with us today.
Thanks for asking me.
And we talk about podcasting, and we got into this just so we could have conversations with fabulous people like yourself who've done such good work, and we're such big fans. So
thank you.
Thanks for spending some
I'm
time.
a fan of you guys too. I'm a fan of podcasts. So it's a podcast? Yes, I'm in.
That's great. Thanks for being here.
Yeah,
Thanks for being here.
thank you.